Welcome to Revenge with Nora. You're sleeping on my couch tonight. My brother announced that from the hallway like he was checking into a hotel he already owned. Except he didn't own anything. I did. Every square foot of it. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 31 years old. I work in contract management for a mid-sized logistics firm in Denver, and this is the story of how one person's sense of entitlement walked itself right into a wall I had been quietly building for months. My brother was standing in the doorway of my apartment with 2 duffel bags and the easy confidence of someone who had never once been told no. He was 36, 5 years older than me, and he had that look on his face, the one he had been perfecting since childhood, the one that said everything was already decided and I just hadn't caught up yet. I looked at the bags. I looked at him. I said, "How long?" He shrugged. "Just until things settle down with Rachel." That was 8 months ago. My brother and his wife had been fighting. That part was true. What was not true was the implication that he would be gone in a week, that he was sleeping on my couch out of temporary necessity, that he was a guest passing through. What was not true was pretty much everything that came after that shrug. By month 2, he had moved from the couch to my second bedroom, the one I used as a home office. He did it while I was at work, on a Tuesday. I came home, and my desk had been pushed into the corner, and his clothes were hanging in the closet. He said the couch was hurting his back. By month 4, he had memorized my grocery schedule and started leaving me lists of things to pick up. Things he liked. Things I did not eat. Specific brands. Once, a $12 bottle of hot sauce. I paid for it. I am still thinking about why I paid for it. By month 6, he had stopped asking altogether. He would just text me from the couch while I was at the store. "Grab some of those frozen burritos. We need more coffee. Do they have that orange juice with extra pulp?" And I would stand in the aisle reading these texts with a feeling I couldn't name yet, something between exhaustion and disbelief, and I would put the things in the cart because it was easier than the conversation I wasn't ready to have. He paid no rent. He contributed nothing toward utilities. He ate my food, used my parking space, left his shoes in the middle of the hallway, and on 2 occasions had friends over on a weeknight without asking me. When I mentioned the shoes, he said I was uptight. When I mentioned the friends, he said I needed to loosen up. When I brought up rent, he said, "Claire, I'm going through something. Can you just be my sister right now?" I was always his sister. That was the problem. The morning everything changed started the same way most bad mornings do. Quietly, with coffee. I was at the kitchen counter, going over a contract deadline, when my brother came out of the bedroom in his gym clothes, opened the refrigerator, stared into it for a long time, and then said, without turning around, "We're out of eggs. Why didn't you get eggs?" I set down my mug. I wasn't at the store. "You went Thursday." "I went Thursday for my things. I didn't know you needed eggs." He turned and looked at me the way he used to look at me when we were kids, and I had said something he considered beneath him. "It's not complicated. Just grab the basics when you go. That's how living together works." I almost said it then. 8 months of almost saying it, and I was right there, at the edge of it. But I didn't, because I knew something he didn't. I had known for 4 days, and knowing it had given me a patience I didn't have before, the kind that comes not from being calm, but from already having one. "I'll add eggs to the list," I said, and I turned back to my laptop. He left for the gym. I sat there in the quiet and let myself feel the full weight of what I was about to do. 4 days earlier, I had received a letter. It was addressed to a name I didn't recognize, but the address was mine. My apartment, my unit number, everything correct except the name. I almost threw it out. It felt like a clerical error, something misdirected, the kind of thing that happens. But something made me look closer. The return address was a lending company I didn't recognize, a financial services group out of Texas. I set the letter on the counter and stared at it for a while. Then I opened it. It was a payment notice, a loan summary, $38,000, taken out 7 months ago. The borrower's name was not mine, but the address, the collateral documentation, the emergency contact listed on the account, they were all mine. My name, my apartment, my phone number listed as a secondary contact. My brother had taken out a loan using my address as his permanent residence and listed me as a co-signer on documents I had never seen and never signed. I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which is something I have never done before or since, and I stayed there for about 10 minutes just processing what I was looking at. He had used my apartment as a financial anchor. He had made me part of a debt I knew nothing about. And he had been sleeping in my spare bedroom, eating my groceries, and complaining about egg shortages while that letter sat in some postal system making its way to my door. I didn't say anything that night. Or the next day. I called a friend from work, a woman named Denise, who had been through a bad divorce and knew more about financial liability than I ever wanted to know. She told me what I needed to do. I spent 3 days doing it quietly. By the time my brother complained about the eggs, I had already spoken to a lawyer. The family dinner happened 2 days later. My mother hosted them every few weeks at her house in Aurora. They were always the same. Pot roast or pasta, her good dishes, my brother holding court about whatever was happening in his life, and me mostly listening and nodding and driving home feeling slightly hollow. I had been going out of obligation for years because it was easier than explaining why I didn't want to. This one, I chose to attend. For different reasons. My brother drove separately. He always did, even though I offered rides, because he liked being able to leave when he wanted to. My mother opened the door when I arrived and pulled me into a hug that smelled like her perfume and the candles she kept on the entry table. She was warm and small, and I loved her, which made what came next harder and also necessary. "Your brother told me you've been stressed," she said, taking my coat. "He said you've been short with him." I smiled. "We'll talk about that tonight." The table was set the same way it always was. My brother was already in his usual chair, beer in hand, the posture of a man who was completely at ease. He nodded at me when I sat down, not in a guilty way, not in a careful way, just a nod. He had no idea. Dinner started the same way it always did. My mother asking questions, my brother answering them expansively, me answering them briefly. He talked about his situation with Rachel, how things were improving, how he was working on himself, how he had some business ideas he was developing. My mother listened with the soft, hopeful expression she always wore when he talked about what he was going to do next. "What kind of business?" I asked. He glanced at me. "Real estate adjacent. More of a consulting angle. I'm still working out the details." "Is that what the loan was for?" The table went quiet. My brother's beer stopped halfway to his mouth. "What loan?" my mother asked. I kept my voice even. The $38,000 loan he took out 7 months ago. The one where he used my apartment as his address of residence and listed me as a co-signer. My mother looked at my brother. My brother put his beer down slowly. "That's not," he started. "I have the letter," I said. "I have the loan documents. I have the signature page where someone signed my name. And I have an appointment with a lawyer on Monday, which I made 4 days ago, which is how long I've been waiting to have this conversation in front of someone else." My mother's voice dropped. "Kevin, what is she talking about?" He leaned back, and I watched him cycle through his options the way I had watched him do since we were children. He landed on the one he usually landed on. "Reframe. Make me the problem. I use the address as a formality," he said. "You're technically my residence right now. It's not a big deal. I was going to tell you. When the business took off. When I could pay it back. Claire, you're making this into something dramatic. It's paperwork. It's fraud," I said simply. The word sat on the table like something that had been dropped. My mother pressed her hand flat on the tablecloth. "Kevin, she's exaggerating." He looked at her. "This is what she does. She takes something small and turns it into a federal case. I needed an address for the loan because Rachel and I were separated, and I didn't have a permanent one. I used Claire's because I was staying there. That's it." "You forged my signature," I said. "I signed on your behalf. You would have said yes." I laughed. It came out quiet and genuine, and I think that surprised him more than anything else. "You signed on my behalf for a $38,000 loan without asking me. And you've been living in my apartment for 8 months, paying nothing, eating my food, using my parking space, and 2 weeks ago you told me I was uptight because your shoes were in the hallway." My mother's jaw was tight. She was looking at my brother the way I had not seen her look at him before, without the cushion she usually kept ready for him. "How much of the loan is left?" she asked him. He hesitated. "Most of it." "How much, Kevin?" "Around $34,000. She closed her eyes for a moment. My brother turned back to me. His voice shifted into the tone I knew well, the one that was softer, almost reasonable, designed to make whoever was listening feel like they were overreacting. I was going to make this right. I just needed time to get on my feet. You know what I've been going through with Rachel. You know this year has been hard for me. I nodded slowly. I do know. And I helped. I gave you a place to stay. I bought your groceries. I paid for your utilities. I let you take over my office. I didn't say anything for 8 months, because I kept telling myself you were going through something. And the entire time, without saying a word to me, you were using my name to borrow money. He looked at me, and for a moment his expression shifted into something I hadn't seen on him before. Something closer to shame than he usually allowed himself to show. "What do you want from me?" he asked. My mother answered before I could. An apology would be a start. He looked at her. "Mom, don't mom me right now." Her voice was quiet, but her hands were flat on the table, and I knew that tone. I had heard it pointed at me. I had never, in 31 years, heard it pointed at him. "You used your sister. You put her name on a debt without her knowledge. You have been living in her home for free for almost a year, and you couldn't even tell her the truth. What exactly were you expecting to happen?" "I expected her to understand," he said, and the simplicity of it was almost breathtaking. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder I had brought. I set it on the table between us. Inside was the original letter, a printout of the loan documents, and 2 pages of notes from my conversation with the lawyer. I didn't open it. I just let it sit there. "Monday," I said, "I'm meeting with my attorney. I'm having my name removed from the loan documentation and disputing the forged signature. That process will likely involve the lender and possibly a formal complaint. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because my financial standing is at risk because of something you did without my consent." My brother stared at the folder. The performance had gone out of him, and what was left looked unfamiliar on his face. "Smaller. Claire," he started. "I also need you out of the apartment by the end of the month." The room went quiet again, a different kind of quiet than before. "That's 3 weeks," he said. "Yes." He looked at our mother. She looked back at him without the expression he was expecting. "She's serious, Kevin," my mother said, "and I think she's right." I watched him absorb that. His older sister, the one who had always bent. His mother, the one who had always caught him. And between the two of them was a folder on a table and a fact he could not explain away. He pushed back from the table, stood up, and walked to the back of the house without saying anything else. A door closed. Not a slam, just a close. Somehow that was worse. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her eyes were wet at the corners, but her voice was steady. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't. I should have asked more questions. I always just assumed he was managing." I turned my hand over and held hers. "He's good at that. Making it look like managing." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How long have you been carrying this?" I thought about it honestly. Longer than 8 months. She nodded like she understood more than I had said. And maybe she did. I drove home alone that night. The city lights came through the windshield in long smears, and I kept the radio off because silence had started to feel like something I deserved rather than something uncomfortable. My apartment was exactly as I had left it. Shoes in the hallway that weren't mine, a coffee mug on the counter that wasn't mine, the particular quality of air in a space shared with someone who doesn't treat it carefully. But I was almost done. My brother came home late. I was in bed reading when I heard the door. He moved around the apartment quietly, which was unusual for him, and I heard the soft sound of the kitchen faucet and the refrigerator and then nothing. I turned the page and kept reading. The next 2 weeks were civil in the way that certain silences are civil. We moved around each other without collision. He made his own coffee. He stopped leaving lists. He came and went without announcing himself. Once, he started to say something in the kitchen and then stopped, and I waited. And he said, "Never mind," and that was the end of it. I did not enjoy it the way I thought I might. It just felt like a long exhale. My lawyer appointment was straightforward. The lender had a process for this exact situation, more common than I had expected, and my attorney moved through the documentation with the calm efficiency of someone who had done it many times. My name was removed from the secondary contact list. The signature dispute was filed. I was no longer connected to the debt. My brother would be responsible for it entirely, which was as it should have been from the start. My mother called the day after the appointment. She had talked to my brother, she said. Really talked to him, the kind of conversation she admitted she should have had years earlier. She told me he was looking at apartments, that he had called Rachel, not to reconcile but to sort out the logistics of separating properly. That he had applied for 2 jobs. I asked if he was angry with me. She said he was mostly angry with himself, which was new. That's a start, I said. He wants to apologize. He can, when he's ready and when it's real. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, you've always been the one holding things together. I think I let that become something I relied on without saying thank you for it. I sat with that. That means a lot, Mom. I mean it. You've been paying a tax the rest of us weren't paying." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just let it sit there between us, and it felt, strangely, like something loosening. The last day of the month was a Saturday. I was doing laundry when my brother came out of the spare room pulling his second duffel bag behind him. He looked tired in a way that wasn't dramatic, just real, the kind of tired that comes from reckoning with something you've been avoiding. He stopped in the middle of the living room. "I set down the laundry. I found a place," he said. "Over in Lakewood. Month to month for now." "Good." He looked at me. "I want to say I'm sorry. I know I should have said it earlier. I've been trying to figure out how to say it in a way that doesn't sound like an excuse, and I don't think I've gotten there yet. But I am sorry." I nodded. It was not a performance. I could tell the difference. "Thank you for not going to the police," he added quietly. "I considered it," I said honestly. "I decided against it. But don't make me regret that." Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile. Something more complicated. "I won't." He picked up his bag. He stopped at the door and turned back once. "You've always been smarter than me," he said. "I think I resented it. That's not your fault." I didn't have a response for that one, so I just said, "Take care of yourself." He nodded. The door closed behind him, and this time it was just the click of a latch, small and ordinary, and then my apartment was mine again. I stood in the middle of the living room for a long time. I noticed small things I hadn't had space to notice before. The way the afternoon light came through the window over the kitchen sink. The sound of the building's heating system, low and constant. The absence of someone else's noise. I moved my desk back to the center of the office, where it belonged. I took his coffee mug, washed it, and put it on the shelf. I did not throw it away because I was not angry anymore. I was just clear, and clarity doesn't need to break things. That evening, Denise came over. We ordered Thai food and sat on the floor because the couch was too comfortable and the floor felt right somehow, more grounded. She asked me how I was feeling, and I told her honestly that I felt like I had set down something very heavy that I had been carrying for so long I had stopped noticing the weight. "Do you think he'll actually change?" she asked. "I think that's up to him," I said. "It's not my project." She raised her chopsticks. Now that is a sentence. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that built rather than diminished. I repainted the spare room a shade of green I had always liked, a dusty sage that made the space feel like it belonged to someone who chose things intentionally. I put my desk back in the corner I preferred and bought a plant for the windowsill, a small succulent that required almost nothing and was thriving anyway. My mother called more often, not in the anxious, managing way she used to call, but just to talk. She told me things about her own life that I had not known because we had spent so many of our phone calls managing everyone else. I learned she had been taking a ceramics class on Thursday evenings. I learned she had a friend from the class named Louise who made her laugh. I learned my mother had a sense of humor about herself that I had never seen before, maybe because there had never been enough room for it. I started having Denise and 2 other friends over on Sunday evenings. Nothing formal, just food and conversation, the kind of slow, unhurried company that doesn't need to be hosted, just shared. My apartment felt, for the first time, like a place I had chosen rather than a place I was managing. 6 weeks after my brother moved out, he texted me, not a request, not a complaint, just a photo of a receipt from a restaurant supply company. He had started doing meal prep for a small client, a fitness trainer who needed lunches delivered weekly. His first real income in nearly a year. I replied, "Good work." He sent back a thumbs up. 2 weeks after that, he called. His voice was different. Not softer exactly, but more careful, like someone choosing their footing on unfamiliar ground. He said he had spoken to a financial counselor and had a repayment plan for the loan. He said he was not asking me for anything. He just wanted me to know. I told him I appreciated him telling me. There was a pause, and then he said, "I spent a lot of years assuming you would always just absorb whatever I put on you. I didn't think about what that was like from your side." I let that sit for a moment before I answered. It was heavy. "I know. I'm sorry." This time it landed differently. Not because the words were different, but because he had done something first. He had taken steps, made a plan, started building before asking to be received. That order of operations mattered more than I expected. "We can have dinner sometime," I said. "Not a family dinner, just us." "I'd like that," he said. The dinner happened on a Wednesday at a Vietnamese place near my office. We talked for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with the apartment or the loan or any of the accumulated weight of the past year. He told me about a podcast he had started listening to about urban farming. I told him about a project at work I was leading for the first time. We split the check and walked to our cars in the parking structure, and he hugged me at the elevator, briefly and without ceremony, and said goodnight. I drove home thinking about how many years I had spent hoping for a version of my brother that required nothing of him, one that would arrive on its own if I just stayed patient and kind and available. What I had found instead was that the version of him I actually wanted could only come. I watered the plant on the windowsill. I made tea. I set up my desk, the one in the center of the room where it belonged, and I opened my laptop and did an hour of work I had been looking forward to, which is the kind of small, specific joy that only becomes visible once everything else stops drowning it out. Some stories end with a door closing and someone driving away, and that feels like enough because it is. Some stories have an extra chapter, not a neat resolution but a beginning, in the first careful steps of something that might eventually become functional and real. This one has both. The door closed. And then, later, a different door opened, smaller and more honest, requiring nothing except that both people come through it as themselves. That is the version I chose to wait for. Not because I was obligated to, but because I decided it was worth it, on my terms, in my own time. After my desk was back where it belonged, and my name was off the paperwork, and the plant was on the windowsill, alive, and asking for almost nothing. That is where I am now. And that is enough.